as everybody knows, public execution is a tactic used by ISIS. The terrorist fanatics kill their prisoners as brutally as they can. Not only do they enjoy the barbarity of their actions, they enjoy the fact that the whole world is watching. With the help of these public killings, they terrorize their enemies, attract new followers among other fanatic groups, but more than anything else, with these taped executions, they send a message. They are undefeatable, unrestrained. There is no law or rule or force that can contain them. Nobody can stop them. And now, public executions captured on video have come to Russia with the same message. Yevgeny Nuzhin went to jail in 1999, having killed a man in a gang fight. In June 2022, he was still doing time in a Russian penal colony when Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Russian tycoon behind the mercenary Wagner group, showed up there to recruit inmates for his military effort in Ukraine. At the end of August, together with other drafted convicts, Nuzhin was sent to the front line. There, he somehow fled in the fog of battle and surrendered to the Ukrainians. In mid-September, an interview with him was posted on YouTube, in which he described how he was recruited, how he intended to surrender from the very start so that he could fight on the Ukrainian side. In the same interview, he talked about how the Wagner group treats the recruited inmates. You start to speak out, to argue, they just shoot you. There is even a special term for this, he said, as if it were some kind of a dystopian movie, not reality. The execution is called obnulение, zeroing. One wrong word, and you are zeroed.
Нас привезли с ИК-3, 92 человека, а туда с ИК-5, тоже с Рязани, их там человек 60. Вот до них там одного обнулили, он запустился с инструктором, там просто словесный понос, его обнулили. И у них с ИК-5 тоже человека обнулили. Вот когда мы встретились на позиции, они рассказывали. Ни за что, можно сказать, за словесный понос, просто вызвали особый отдел, и его расстреляли и там где-то же закопали.
On November 12, a video of Yevgeny Nuzhin's execution appeared on one of the Telegram channels believed to be associated with the Wagner group. In this horrifying video, his head is duct taped to bricks. And he confesses, on September 4th, he carried out his plan to switch to fight alongside Ukrainian troops. And then his head is smashed with a sledgehammer, blatantly and joyfully. As a warning to the others, this is what will happen to every defector. On the same day, Prigozhin personally commented on this intentionally leaked tape, cheerful, mocking, and bold.
I prefer to watch the story in the theatre. As for the executed, in this show, it is clear that he did not find happiness in Ukraine, but instead met with unkind, although fair people. It seems to me that this film is called A Dog Gets a Dog's Death.
Nuzhin is a traitor, Prigozhin explains. If not officially, practically, he takes responsibility for the murder and for posting it online. There is little doubt it was his personal order to retrieve and punish Yevgeny Nuzhin. How exactly it was carried out is a separate and important issue. In the same video, just before his death, Nuzhin says that he was captured in Kiev, but it's hardly true. Most likely, it was a prisoner exchange. This is what activists from the human rights group Gulagu.net, No to Gulag, which deals with prisoners' rights, immediately suggested. Anastasia Kashevarova, the former press secretary of the Speaker of the Russian Parliament, claims that in exchange for Nuzhin, the Ukrainian forces received their prisoners directly from Wagner. BBC journalist Ilya Barabanov also confirms this version of the story, citing his own sources in Ukraine.
Бывает, когда пленных там меняют там с какими-то донецкими людьми, есть переговорные линии по линии генштабов, там у Герасимова есть люди, которые занимаются обменами военнослужащих. Но точно так же есть и какая-то переговорная линия, собственно, с Пригожинским. На этом участке фронта периодически какие-то обмены происходят. Как говорят мои там, собеседники, конкретно за этого человека была предложена очень выгодная сделка, скажем так.
This is an important case when it comes to the dangers of surrendering. A month ago, Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov addressed the Russian military in Russian. He urged them to surrender. We guarantee life, safety, and justice to all who refuse to fight immediately. But Yevgeny Nuzhin was granted none of these things. No to Gulag activists appealed to Ukrainian President Zelensky to look into how Nuzhin ended up in the hands of his executioners.
We asked Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to explain what happened and speak out on this subject. Because now, the more Ukrainian officials remain silent, the greater the number of different versions of the story and theories gain traction. All of this has a tremendously negative effect on public opinion and on the likelihood of Russian servicemen actually surrendering and willingly going into captivity.
2 days later, senior Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhail Podolyak told TV Rain that Nuzhin requested an exchange by his own free will.
A prisoner of war can write a voluntary refusal of the exchange procedure, which will be honored at every level, meaning among the military staff organizing prisoner exchange and all other authorities, including the security service, military intelligence service, and prosecutor general, which plays a vital role here. Each prisoner undergoes questioning as part of the investigation process to gauge their participation in crimes against humanity. They're essentially asked if they killed women, children, old people, and if it can be proven, and so on. You have to understand that not all prisoners surrender without a fight. Moreover, even if someone surrenders voluntarily, it could be a situation where he had no other option left except to surrender or to die on the battlefield. And accordingly, the prosecutor's office or investigative authorities need to conduct some sort of check. After this, the prisoner can write a statement that they do not wish to be exchanged back to the Russian Federation. Or, on the flip side, that they are willing to be exchanged for an analogous Ukrainian prisoner of war as part of the legal exchange process. That's it. And in this case, this exchange process clearly took place.
This is very hard to imagine. Why would Nuzhin agree to a swap that threatens his life directly? But let's get back to Russia. At home, not only has this terrifying taped execution gone unpunished, state officials and propagandists haven't even condemned or criticized it. Commenting on this video, head of RT Margarita Simonyan actually applauds Prigozhin. Prigozhin is at the front line. He knows better how to do his job, she says. And if it weren't for the Wagner group, she says, direct quote, it would be your husbands and sons you would be mourning. It's none of our business, says Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov. In other words, we don't care. The state doesn't care that thugs with sledgehammers are taking the right of trial and execution into their own hands. Nationalist bloggers put it even more clearly. The history of liberalism in Russia is over. Everything will be different now. For treason and betrayal, the punishment is death. Nobody will be able to stop these death sentences. And of course, Prigozhin knows this execution is approved by his boss, Vladimir Putin. Putin has always divided the world into enemies and traitors, and for traitors, he shows no mercy. This is what he said after 2 Russian agents carried out an assassination attempt on former spy Sergei Skripal in the English town of Salisbury in March 2018.
Он просто шпион, предатель Родины. Он просто подонок. Вот и все.
So Prigozhin knows that he will be thanked for what he did. In Soviet times, he was a gangster and a criminal. In the 1980s, he spent almost 10 years in prison for street robberies. Under Putin, Prigozhin became an influential businessman and was nicknamed Putin's chef. He operated restaurants in St. Petersburg, then became a caterer for state agencies and got rich on government contracts. He then created a powerful propaganda network called the Internet Research Agency, which became known as the Troll Factory and was accused by American authorities of interfering in its elections. We interfered, are interfering, and will interfere, Prigozhin now admits. And then Prigozhin became an essential supplier of mercenaries for Putin's global military operations, perhaps most notably in Syria. It is no coincidence that taped assassination of Yevgeny Nuzhin resembles the ISIS executions.
They extrajudicially executed and killed a number of people in Syria who tried to defect to the opposition to Bashar al-Assad and advocate for Syrian independence. They used the same sledgehammers. And it's not so secret anymore. A number of journalists have investigated how members of Prigozhin's illegal paramilitary organization, PMC Wagner, are being used to eliminate the unwanted individuals.
During the course of this war, Prigozhin's status has upgraded dramatically. In the past few months, he has drastically increased his standing. The Wagner Group has become a private army operating in parallel with the Russian military, owning heavy combat equipment and even fighter jets. Not only does Prigozhin not report to the Minister of Defense or the Chief of the General Staff, but his influence is such that he can eventually overrule their decisions. He is the only one in Putin's entourage who has the authority to criticize military command. He has already managed to get some of the generals dismissed. It is Prigozhin who has essentially become the driving force and the protagonist of this war. According to my source close to the Kremlin, Sergei Surovikin, the commander of Russian troops in Ukraine, is on his payroll. The Russian military's retreat from Kherson under Surovikin's leadership has been one of the most important events of this war. Watch how Prigozhin comments like a superior talking about a subordinate.
He carried out the task in an orderly manner, with no fear, taking full responsibility for decision-making. I want to stress that a withdrawal operation is always extremely difficult. Turning your back on the enemy makes it impossible to leave your position.
Prigozhin has already become a parallel commander-in-chief. Now he claims he is a parallel state power. The execution of Nuzhin manifests that the Russian state has lost its monopoly on violence. Like in the Middle Ages, in Russia, it is no longer the courts that punish and pardon the guilty, even if these courts are controlled from above, but instead the sledgehammer-wielding bandits. Extrajudicial punishment is encouraged even at the government level. How else can we treat the recent decision of the Ministry of Justice to publish the personal data of those labeled as foreign agents, if not an invitation to punish? Now, Prigozhin is calling for, quote, a Stalinist crackdown on Russian businessmen who do not support the war. Russian elites are scared, reports Bloomberg. Businessmen fear for their families. This is how Russia is sinking into the Middle Ages. And according to one of my sources, the Russian special services now have no other task but to stop Prigozhin. Right before their eyes, he's assuming power.